He did as president because he likes this culture war. He thinks it's a good culture war to fight. He thinks he wins this culture war. And he's likely right. He does win this culture war, but at the cost of polarizing the debate a little bit more. When President Trump took office, some 75% of Americans thought kneeling for the national anthem was bad. Now that number is in the low 60s last time I checked. A lot of that has to do with President Trump's polarizing personality. With all of that said, the media have latched on to the national anthem controversy, and they have not let go since. The NFL has done a horrible job of killing the controversy. Instead of just killing it at the outset by saying, listen, you don't get to kneel for the anthem, you're fine. You want to protest in your off hours, enjoy, but you don't get to do it on our fields. Instead of them doing that, they allowed it to happen, they allowed it to fester, and it ended up hurting the NFL in a pretty serious way. The ratings for the NFL have been in decline for the last 2 years. It's been a serious image issue for the NFL. Well, now Nike is jumping into the fray. So Nike decided that they are going to do this huge ad campaign that is going to focus on Colin Kaepernick. He is part of the 30th anniversary of Nike's Just Do It campaign. And here is what the ad looks like. It's a picture of Colin Kaepernick, a close-up of his face in black and white. It says, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. And then there's the Nike swoosh and it says, just do it. Okay, so there's so many elements of this that are just fabulously ironic. First of all, this social justice warrior campaign to sell sneakers produced by small children in Vietnam, presumably, is kind of hilarious. Watching the entire left resonate around a huge billion-dollar company, a huge corporation that allegedly exploits child labor in third world countries because, hey, Colin Kaepernick, that's pretty hilarious. It is also kind of hilarious that the slogan itself, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, it's a really dumb slogan. In fact, it's basically Thanos' slogan from Avengers Infinity Wars. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing half of humanity. What you believe is actually the key issue. I mean, if we're actually going to take that slogan seriously, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, it's not about believing in something. It's about what you believe in. The question is, are you believing the right things? Colin Kaepernick is not. He's never provided a shred of data to support his assertions that black people in the United States are being disproportionately shot by police because, in fact, they are not. And then we get to the actual issue of Colin Kaepernick being the face of this particular culture war. We get to the bottom line here, and there's a great irony to it, which I'll discuss in just a second. So Colin Kaepernick, again, says believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, over his face for the Nike Just Do It campaign. I do love the fact that when you hashtag Just Do It with all the capitals properly utilized, it looks like Just Dolt. But in any case, using Colin Kaepernick, he's a poor example of this because he didn't sacrifice anything. Colin Kaepernick did not sacrifice a thing. If we're going to talk about people who sacrificed in the NFL, there are legitimate former military members in the NFL. Now, Pat Tillman died in the line of duty, working as a soldier in Afghanistan for the NFL. Did Nike do a campaign around him? Of course they didn't, right? They just do it around Colin Kaepernick. And this is for capitalistic reasons. It is to make money. Nike is a corporation. They know we'll be talking about it today. They hope that by right-wingers talking about it, they will drive more people on the left to go out and buy sneakers on the basis of we don't like President Trump. And let's be frank about this. This is an anti-Trump campaign. This rally first started in the 2016 campaign. If Hillary Clinton were president right now, do you think that Nike would actually be running this ad campaign? Of course not. Of course not. Colin Kaepernick has not sacrificed anything. Not only did he not sacrifice nothing, he only started doing this when he became a useless backup quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. And then after that, he has kept his name in the headlines. He's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated despite not playing for 2 years. Tim Tebow isn't on the cover of Sports Illustrated every 2 weeks because Tim Tebow isn't in with the social justice warrior crowd. But Tim Tebow was in many ways sort of the equivalent of Colin Kaepernick in that he had one kind of terrific season where he unexpectedly led the Denver Broncos to wins in the playoffs, and then he fell off the map. But Colin Kaepernick, he took over for Alex Smith halfway through a season with the San Francisco 49ers. They went to the Super Bowl, he lost, and then he was nothing. Okay, but still, he's on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He's still championed as this thought leader, even though I'm not sure Colin Kaepernick has ever had any real thought. And the reason I say that is because Colin Kaepernick has never made an articulate defense of his own position on any of this stuff. There are people who have made articulate defenses on his behalf, but he's never done it himself. He has not sacrificed anything, and he's slated to earn legitimately millions of dollars. He's getting a branded line off of not being in athletics for 2 years. He's getting a branded line, and he's going to make millions of dollars off of kneeling for the national anthem. So why is Nike doing all of this? Precisely so that we'll talk about it. It is a troll. It's obviously a troll. They are hoping that the president of the United States sounds off about it. Trump undoubtedly will sign off on it. I mean, he will undoubtedly sound off about it on Twitter because he thinks, again, that this is a culture war worth fighting. But there's no question that this is all designed to sell more sneakers. And one of the reasons that Nike thinks that they can get away with this, obviously, is because disproportionate amounts of money are spent on clothing and apparel by members of the black community, many of whom are supporters of Colin Kaepernick in this particular controversy. Okay, that is not a racial supposition. That is an economic supposition. Economists Kerwin Charles, Eric Hurst, Nikolai Rusinoff from University of Chicago did a study called Conspicuous Consumption and Race. And what they found is that blacks and Hispanics spend a lot more than whites with comparable incomes on visible goods, meaning clothes, cars, and jewelry, up to an additional 30%. There's been a long-standing sort of sociological investigation into why, for example, it seems that lower-income black folks spend more on sneakers. And some of that has to do with pride in culture. Some of that has to do with the fact that, like Air Jordans were a massive cultural totem in the 1990s. All of that is true, but just for capitalistic purposes, it's pretty obvious that Nike is attempting to appeal to this particular consumer base, along with a left that will resonate to the support of Colin Kaepernick. And it's also important to note that according to Nielsen, African Americans are more likely to interact with brands on social media or to use social networks to support companies and brands, 44% more likely. So they're hoping that this campaign goes viral, particularly among black audiences, and that people on the left will resonate to this as well. So in the end, capitalism wins. The great irony of this is that the social justice warriors championing this, they're really championing the power of capitalism. But is it insulting? Of course it's insulting. Is it designed to slap President Trump? Of course it's designed to slap President Trump. And honestly, I'm not sure that President Trump could ask for much more. Nike made an in-kind contribution to the Trump campaign. Because if this battle in 2018 and 2020 is going to be about kneeling for the flag, most Americans are not on board with that. Most Americans don't look at Colin Kaepernick and see an American hero. They don't even see a guy who's made a lot of sacrifices. Muhammad Ali was the champion of the world. He was the heavyweight boxing champion of the world when he was suspended from boxing for not volunteering for the Vietnam draft, for not being drafted, and for saying things about the Viet Cong and all this kind of stuff under the influence of Elijah Muhammad and the evil Nation of Islam. But at least he sacrificed something. Or the guy sacrificed years of his career. He went to jail for this. Colin Kaepernick has sacrificed zero things, but apparently sacrificing everything means signing contracts worth millions of dollars in order to promote a quote-unquote globalist brand that is selling sneakers made at half price off by child labor. So that's exciting stuff. Speaking of sort of virtue signaling and the backlash to President Trump, the other big story over the weekend was obviously the funeral for John McCain. We're going to talk about that, for an American patriot and hero. But his funeral turned into a bit of as I've said in the past, a turd tornado. It turned into a bit of craziness. And that's because a bunch of speakers decided to get up and bash President Trump. Now, do I think that President Trump treated John McCain well in life? No, I don't. I think it was ridiculous for President Trump to say that John McCain was not a war hero. It was kind of a gross thing to say. Do I think that John McCain didn't like President Trump? Yes. It seems to me that his peak and his anger at President Trump led him to make a terrible decision when it came to Obamacare and prevent the overthrowing of large portions of Obamacare simply out of a level of personal pique. Was I a huge John McCain fan as a politician? No, I was not a huge John McCain fan as a politician. But with that said, was it petty for the president to not lower the flag to half staff for a week as a sort of normal procedure? Yes, it was petty. Did it look silly? Yes, it looked silly. The president shouldn't have engaged that way. With that said, using a funeral in order to promote an anti-Trump agenda is foolish for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think that John McCain's life was about a fair bit more than Donald Trump. I really do. I mean, this is a guy who had served since the late 1960s. Boiling that down to an anti-Trump message seems to me a real, non-proper evaluation of his role in American history and what he was. And listen, Meghan McCain gets to say what she wants about her father. It's her father. She gets to say whatever she wants. But we also get to criticize that once we stray into overtly political territory. And there were a lot of commentators saying, well, there were no overt slaps at Trump. Let's not be intellectually dishonest. It was very obvious that there were a bunch of overt slaps at President Trump. And more than that, I think it was counterproductive. Even if you don't like the way that President Trump goes about politics, even if you think that President Trump is uncivil, which I do, even if you think that President Trump does not serve his own purposes well when he lashes out at people, which I do, even if you think that President Trump says things that are cruel and vile on a fairly frequent basis, which I do, is it worthwhile? Is it useful for a bunch of people to get up at John McCain's funeral and say all of this stuff? And more importantly, is it useful to do that from quote unquote both sides of the aisle? Because I think that what that's doing is promulgating a myth that Trump is actually the response to. The myth is that there was a civil politics before Trump. There was not. Okay, the idea that there was a civil politics before Trump means that you were not watching. For 20, 30, 40 years, you were not watching. In the 1960s, there were political riots in this country. At the 1968 Chicago Convention, there were legitimate riots in the street at the Democratic National Convention. There were thousands of bombings, political bombings across the United States in the 1970s. During the Barack Obama administration, we saw riots in Baltimore. We saw riots in Ferguson. We saw riots in other places in the United States. We saw at President Trump's rallies during the 2016 campaign, Trump supporters being physically beaten. We saw President Trump have to cancel an actual rally in Chicago due to intimidation outside the events. We've seen over the past several years before Trump was in office. When I went to Berkeley, I required 600 police officers to protect me. I remember there was a near riot when I spoke at Cal State Los Angeles, and that was before Trump was president. The idea that politics was some sort of civil game where everybody got along before President Trump is nonsense. And more than that, to paper over the serious political divisions in this country with this veneer of civility, it makes it look like there's a professional political class invested in civility because they actually like each other, and Trump is the great outsider, and so we don't like Trump because he's the great outsider. Again, there are legitimate reasons to criticize the President of the United States for his approach to politics. But when you promulgate this absolute myth that there was a civil politics between, say, Barack Obama and John McCain, or Barack Obama and George W. Bush. I mean, Barack Obama basically called George W. Bush a war criminal. I mean, back in 2000, I think this is 2003, this is Barack Obama talking about the situation in Afghanistan. This is audio uncovered in 2007. This is Barack Obama, I guess it was in 2007, talking about George W. Bush's troops, the service of troops under George W. Bush in Afghanistan.
You've got to get the job done there. And that requires us to have enough troops that we're not just air raiding villages and killing civilians, which is causing enormous problems there.
Okay, Barack Obama accusing George W. Bush of presiding effectively over war crimes. But we are supposed to believe that it was Donald Trump who broke our politics. This is why I say all of this leads to a backlash in favor of President Trump. Having all of these mainstream political figures from both sides of the aisle kind of unite in opposition to Trump, but not on the basis of actual sins committed by President Trump, on the basis of he's just not nice enough, and look how we get along. Look how George W. Bush and Bill Clinton get along. Look how George W. Bush and Barack Obama get along. I don't like that part of politics, okay? There's this sense. I'm a sports fan. So as a sports fan, there used to be something called non-fraternization rules in sports, where it was like the New York Yankees were playing the Boston Red Sox, and you weren't allowed to go out to dinner with members of the opposing team after the game because you felt that sort of sacrificed the competitive edge, that if you were too close with your competitors, then this sacrificed the competitive edge. And so there were all these owners who basically said you're not allowed to fraternize with members of the opposition team. And as a fan, that makes sense to me because I don't want to see my favorite player who has to face down that batter tomorrow. I don't want to know that they're best friends. It doesn't help because I want to root for my team and root against the other team. Well, in politics, that rooting actually has real stakes. I don't want George W. Bush to be best friends with Barack Obama. I don't want George W. Bush to be best friends with Bill Clinton. I want them to be civil. I want them to recognize that they shouldn't be demagoguing issues. That's where you can criticize President Trump. But when you act like you're best friends and you're buddy, and we're all part of this big group who loves each other, and then there's that Trump guy, all that ends up doing is driving people into President Trump. I mean, ironically, it helps President Trump because even people like me look at this and they go, I'm sorry, but if politics is how nice George W. Bush is to Michelle Obama by handing her candy, I'm not all that interested because the things they do have real stakes. The politics that they embrace have actual stakes. And again, I'm somebody who is warm toward the argument that President Trump has not been good for American politics in a wide variety of ways. But when you push this lie that politics is really about George W. Bush and Michelle Obama being besties and that there are no consequences to any of this, I don't care whether George W. Bush likes Michelle Obama. I don't care whether George H.W. and Bill Clinton are friends. I don't want them to be friends because I don't think that is reflective of deep underlying political differences that exist in this country. I want them to be battling tooth and nail. If they can be friends and battle tooth and nail, that's one thing. But I don't think that they were battling tooth and nail. I think that there's a feeling in this country that the elites in both parties are actually backpatting each other and are too friendly for the good of the country. That what we actually need in some ways is more political conflict. That doesn't mean more incivility. But again, like people were championing, look how nice it was that George W. Bush was handing Michelle Obama candy. Listen, is it fine that he's handing her candy? Sure. Like I'm not going to pretend that I think he should reject the candy. I don't think that he shouldn't hand Michelle Obama candy. But by the same token, people celebrating this as, oh, well, isn't this what American politics is really about? George W. Bush handing Michelle Obama candy? No, it seems to me what American politics is really about is Barack Obama slandering George W. Bush as a war criminal for 8 years and then running on the back of that to become president of the United States and push policies, actively create policies that are targeted at people like me. Right? When I say people like me, I mean particularly religious conservatives. That's the part I care about. I don't care about them handing candy to each other. People feel there's a veneer to politics that is a lie, and this all was part of the veneer of politics that was a lie. In a second, I'm going to show you the clips of these various speakers who are engaging. I'm going to show you why people think this is a lie.